Racist fighter throws juice on Snoop Dogg. What he did then is unbelievable. Have you ever wondered how a moment of blatant racism could lead to an unexpected chain of events that would shake the entertainment world to its core? Los Angeles International Airport, a bustling hub of travel and celebrity sightings, became the stage for an incident that would soon make headlines across the globe. Snoop Dogg, the legendary rapper known for his laid-back demeanor and iconic music, found himself at the center of a storm he never saw coming. Before we dive into this shocking tale, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. Let us know in the comments where you're watching this story from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. It was a typical sunny day in LA when Snoop Dogg, dressed in his signature relaxed style, strolled through the first-class lounge. Little did he know that his peaceful journey was about to take a dramatic turn. As he approached the counter to inquire about his flight, a female flight attendant, her face twisted with disdain, did the unthinkable. In a split second, driven by what could only be described as pure prejudice, she grabbed a nearby glass of juice and hurled its contents directly at the unsuspecting rapper. The orange liquid splashed across Snoop's designer outfit, leaving him stunned and the surrounding passengers gasping in disbelief. The air in the lounge grew thick with tension as everyone waited to see how the famously cool-headed artist would react. Would this be the moment that pushed even the calmest of celebrities over the edge? The world held its breath, cameras at the ready as the scene unfolded. But what happened next would set in motion a series of events that no one could have predicted. Snoop Dogg's response to this act of aggression would not only challenge perceptions, but also ignite a firestorm of controversy and admiration. As security rushed to the scene and onlookers pulled out their phones to capture the aftermath, Snoop Dogg made a decision that would alter the course of his career and potentially change the conversation about racism in America. What could Snoop Dogg possibly do in the face of such blatant disrespect that would be deemed unbelievable? How would this incident transform not just his life, but the lives of countless others? The story that follows is one of resilience, creativity, and the power of turning negativity into a force for positive change. It's a tale that reminds us that sometimes the most powerful responses to hate are the ones that catch us completely off guard. As we delve deeper into this extraordinary chain of events, ask yourself, what would you do if faced with such a public display of racism? And more importantly, how far would you go to right a wrong and make a lasting impact on society? Stay tuned as we unravel the shocking details of Snoop Dogg's unbelievable response to racism and discover how one man's actions in the face of adversity can spark a movement that touches hearts and changes minds across the nation. Remember, in a world where hatred often makes the headlines, it's the unexpected acts of dignity and wisdom that truly have the power to transform our society. Snoop Dogg's story is just beginning, and trust us, you won't want to miss what happens next. The bustling corridors of LAX became eerily silent as news of the incident spread like wildfire. Snoop Dogg, still dripping with orange juice, stood tall amidst the chaos. His entourage, a mix of longtime friends and new acquaintances, formed a protective circle around him, their faces a blend of shock and simmering anger. Among them was Marcus, Snoop's childhood friend and now his manager, whose quick thinking had already set in motion a series of calls to their legal team. Then there was Jasmine, Snoop's social media guru, her fingers flying across her phone screen as she worked to control the narrative that was rapidly unfolding online. The flight attendant, now identified as Sarah Thompson, a 15-year veteran of the airline industry, was being escorted away by airport security. Her face, once contorted with hatred, now showed the first signs of realization at the magnitude of her actions. As she was led away, her eyes darted nervously between Snoop and the growing crowd of onlookers, many of whom had their phones out, capturing every moment. In the background, airport staff scrambled to restore order. Janet, the the head of customer service, a woman in her mid-50s with streaks of grey in her dark hair, approached Snoop with a mix of professionalism and genuine concern. "Mr. Broadus," she said, using Snoop's real name, "on behalf of the entire airport, I want to express our deepest apologies. Please let us assist you in any way we can." Snoop, known for his cool demeanor, surprised everyone with his calm response. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, his voice steady. "But right now I need a moment to think." His words carried weight, hinting at the internal struggle between anger and a desire for something more profound than mere retaliation. As the immediate shock subsided, the cultural implications of the incident began to sink in. This wasn't just about Snoop Dogg, the celebrity. This was about Calvin Broadus, a black man facing the ugly reality of racism that still plagued America. The incident served as a stark reminder that fame and success did not shield one from prejudice. The airport, a melting pot of cultures and backgrounds, became a microcosm of American society. Travelers from all walks of life watched the scene unfold. Their reactions a mix of outrage, sympathy, and for some, uncomfortable self-reflection. Among them was Michael Chen, a young Asian-American vlogger who had captured the entire incident on his camera. His footage would later become crucial in the unfolding narrative. As Snoop and his team were ushered into a private lounge, the rapper's mind raced with memories. He thought back to his youth in Long Beach, California, where he had first encountered the harsh realities of racial prejudice. He remembered the advice of his grandmother, a pillar of strength in his life, who had always taught him to respond to hatred with wisdom and dignity. Meanwhile, in the airport's security office, Sarah Thompson sat in stunned silence. Her colleagues, many of whom had worked with her for years, struggled to reconcile the woman they knew with the actions they had just witnessed. David, the head of airport security, a stern man with over 2 decades of experience, watched the security footage in disbelief, knowing that this incident would have far-reaching consequences. Outside, news vans began to arrive, their satellite dishes reaching towards the sky like metallic flowers. Among them was Alicia Rodriguez, a rising star in investigative journalism, known for her nuanced coverage of racial issues. As she prepared for her live report, she couldn't help but wonder how this story would unfold and what impact it might have on the ongoing national conversation about race and privilege. Back in the private lounge, Snoop's team huddled around him. Marcus, ever the strategist, was already thinking about damage control and potential opportunities. Jasmine monitored the explosion of activity on social media, where hashtags related to the incident were trending worldwide. And then there was DJ, Snoop's longtime producer and friend, who simply sat next to the rapper in silent support, understanding that sometimes presence speaks louder than words. As the hours ticked by, the incident at LAX transformed from a personal affront to a cultural flashpoint. Snoop Dogg found himself at a crossroads, facing a decision that would not only define this moment, but potentially shape his legacy. The world waited with bated breath, wondering, what would Snoop do next? Little did they know, the rapper's response would be something no one could have anticipated. A move that would challenge perceptions, ignite discussions, and possibly change the trajectory of the fight against racism in America. As the sun began to set over Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the airport terminals, the incident that had started as a shocking act of racism was rapidly evolving into a complex web of conflicts, each thread pulling tighter as the hours passed. Snoop Dogg, having changed into fresh clothes provided by his team, sat in contemplative silence. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a steely determination that was palpable to everyone in the room. His eyes, usually twinkling with mischief, now held a fierce intensity as he formulated his next move. Outside the private lounge, a storm was brewing. News of the incident had spread like wildfire across social media platforms, igniting fierce debates and causing hashtags like Natchez Justice for Snoop and Yet Racism at RAC1ST to trend globally. The court of public opinion was in full session, with millions weighing in on what should happen next. Marcus, Snoop's manager, paced the room, his phone constantly buzzing with calls from media outlets, record label executives, and even politicians seeking to align themselves with the cause. "Snoop," he said, his voice tense, "we need to make a statement soon. The longer we wait, the more this narrative spins out of control." Jasmine chimed in, her eyes never leaving her tablet. "He's right. The internet is going crazy. There are calls for boycotts of the airline, protests at the airport, and, oh man, some people are even defending the flight attendant." This last bit of information caused Snoop to raise an eyebrow. "Defending her? How?" Jasmine hesitated before responding. "Some are claiming it was just a misunderstanding, or that you must have provoked her somehow. It's a small minority, but they're vocal." The tension in the room ratcheted up a notch. DJ, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "Man, this ain't just about you anymore. This is bigger than all of us now." As if to underscore DJ's point, a commotion could be heard outside. The group moved to the window to see a growing crowd of protesters gathering at the airport entrance, their signs demanding justice and an end to racial profiling. Meanwhile, in another part of the airport, Sarah Thompson was facing her own set of challenges. As she sat in a small office, surrounded by stern-faced airline executives and legal representatives, the gravity of her actions began to sink in. Her career, built over a decade and a half, was hanging by a thread. "Ms. Thompson," began the airline's head of HR, a woman with a sharp suit and an even sharper gaze, "can you explain to us what prompted your actions today?" Sarah's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. How could she explain something she herself didn't fully understand? The moment replayed in her mind, seeing Snoop approach the counter, feeling an inexplicable surge of fear and anger, and then chaos. I don't know," she finally managed to stammer out. The HR director's eyes narrowed. "You understand that your actions have not only jeopardized your own career, but have put this entire company at risk of a massive lawsuit and public relations disaster." As Sarah grappled with the consequences of her actions, another conflict was unfolding in the airport's security center. Michael Chen, the vlogger who had captured the incident on camera, found himself in a heated argument with airport security. "You can't confiscate my camera," Michael protested, clutching his equipment protectively. "This is a matter of public interest." David, the head of security, tried to reason with him. "We're not confiscating it, Mr. Chen. We're simply asking for a copy of the footage as evidence. This is a sensitive situation." Michael's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "And how do I know you won't try to bury this evidence?" Their argument was interrupted by the arrival of Alicia Rodriguez, the investigative journalist. "Excuse me," she interjected, her press badge prominently displayed, "but I believe the public has a right to know what happened here today." As these various conflicts simmered and boiled over, Snoop Dogg found himself at the eye of the storm. The pressure to respond, to act, to make a statement was immense. Everyone had an opinion on what he should do next. Some advised a fiery press conference, calling out the racism he had experienced. Others suggested legal action, hitting the airline where it hurt most, their wallet. There were even whispers of using this as material for a new track, turning pain into art, as he had done so many times before. But as Snoop listened to the cacophony of voices around him, a plan began to form in his mind. It was unconventional, potentially risky, and would require a level of vulnerability he rarely showed to the public. Yet, as the idea took shape, he felt a sense of rightness settle over him. "I know what we need to do," Snoop finally said, his voice cutting through the chaos in the room. All eyes turned to him, waiting. With a mix of determination and a hint of his signature sly smile, Snoop laid out his plan. As he spoke, the faces around him transformed from confusion to surprise, and finally to a shared sense of purpose. This wasn't just about getting even anymore. It wasn't even about Snoop Dogg, the celebrity. This was about changing the conversation, about turning a moment of hate into an opportunity for growth and understanding. As night fell over Los Angeles, the stage was set for a response that would shock the world and challenge perceptions of how to confront racism in the 21st century. Snoop Dogg was about to remind everyone why he was not just a rapper, but a cultural icon capable of turning the tables in the most unexpected ways. As Snoop's plan began to take shape, the ripple effects of the incident spread far beyond the confines of LAX, intertwining with broader societal issues and personal dramas. In the heart of South Central Los Angeles, Snoop's old neighborhood, news of the incident sparked a different kind of reaction. Big Mike, a community leader and childhood friend of Snoop's, organized an impromptu gathering at the local community center. The room buzzed with a mix of anger and pride, anger at the continuing specter of racism, and pride that one of their own was at the center of what was quickly becoming a national conversation. "This ain't just about Snoop," Big Mike addressed the crowd, his voice carrying the weight of years of struggle. "This is about every one of us who's ever been looked at sideways because of the color of our skin. But we ain't just gonna get mad, we're gonna get smart." As Big Mike spoke, a young woman named Tasha listened intently. An aspiring lawyer working her way through law school, Tasha saw in this incident a potential landmark case for racial discrimination. Her mind raced with legal precedents and potential arguments, seeing beyond the celebrity headline to the core issues at stake. Meanwhile, across town in a posh Beverly Hills mansion, record executive Victor Goldstein paced in his home office. The incident with Snoop, one of his label's biggest stars, presented both a crisis and an opportunity. "We need to get ahead of this," he barked into his phone. "I want a press release drafted yesterday and get me Snoop's team on the line." But as Victor planned damage control, his teenage daughter Zoe watched the unfolding events with a different perspective. A fan of Snoop's music and an active participant in her school's social justice club, Zoe felt torn between her father's corporate interests and her own beliefs about right and wrong. Back at the airport, the story took another turn as Sarah Thompson's background came to light. Journalists digging into her past uncovered a history of microaggressions reported by co-workers of color, but also a complicated personal story. Sarah had grown up in a small, predominantly white town, her limited exposure to diversity shaped by media stereotypes and familial prejudices. This revelation added layers of complexity to the narrative. Was Sarah a victim of her own limited worldview, or was she fully culpable for her actions? The debate raged online, with social media users fiercely arguing both sides. As these subplots unfolded, Alicia Rodriguez, the investigative journalist, found herself grappling with how to report on the story responsibly. She knew the importance of balanced journalism, but also felt the weight of her own experiences as a woman of color in a predominantly white industry. In her small apartment, surrounded by notes and research, Alicia made a decision. This story wouldn't just be about one incident, but about the broader context of race relations in America. She began reaching out to sociologists, civil rights leaders, and everyday people affected by racial profiling. Simultaneously, in the digital realm, the incident was taking on a life of its own. Memes and remixes of the airport footage flooded social media platforms. While some used humor to cope with the seriousness of the situation, others saw an opportunity to further divide. Tech entrepreneur Raj Patel watched this unfold with growing concern. As the CEO of a rising social media platform, he saw firsthand how incidents like this could be weaponized to spread misinformation and hate. Raj made a quick decision, calling an emergency meeting with his content moderation team to develop new guidelines for handling racially charged content. As night deepened, these various threads began to intertwine in unexpected ways. Tasha, the aspiring lawyer, found herself on a late-night call with Alicia, providing legal context for the journalist's story. Zoe, in an act of rebellion against her father, anonymously leaked insider information about the record label's planned response to Raj's platform, setting off a new wave of online speculation. And through it all, Snoop Dogg's plan continued to evolve. With each passing hour, what had started as a personal affront was transforming into a moment of potential social change. The pressure was mounting, not just on Snoop, but on everyone involved, to respond to this incident in a way that could move the conversation forward. As dawn approached, the stage was set for a day that would challenge perceptions, test allegiances, and potentially reshape the dialogue around race in America. And at the center of it all was Snoop Dogg, preparing to make a move that no one saw coming. The following morning, as Los Angeles stirred to life under a hazy sun, the world waited with bated breath for Snoop Dogg's response. News channels ran constant updates, social media buzzed with speculation, and crowds gathered outside LAX, their signs and chants a cacophony of demands for justice. But Snoop had vanished. His team, led by the ever-resourceful Marcus, had orchestrated a masterful disappearing act. No social media updates, no press statements, nothing. The silence was deafening, and it only amplified the world's curiosity. As the clock struck 10 a.m., screens across America suddenly flickered. A coordinated takeover of major networks and streaming platforms began, catching everyone off guard. The image that appeared was not what anyone expected. There sat Snoop Dogg, but not in his usual relaxed pose or surrounded by the trappings of his celebrity status. Instead, he was seated at a simple wooden table, dressed in a plain button-up shirt, his signature braids tied back neatly. The setting was sparse, almost austere, but it wasn't Snoop who spoke first. It was Sarah Thompson. The flight attendant, looking visibly shaken but composed, began to speak. "Yesterday, I committed an act of blatant racism," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "There's no excuse for what I did, and I'm here to take full responsibility for my actions." The camera panned out, revealing that Snoop and Sarah were seated across from each other. The tension was palpable, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Snoop leaned forward, his eyes locked with Sarah's. "I appreciate you being here," he said, his tone measured. "But I gotta ask, why? Why'd you do it?" What followed was a raw, unscripted conversation that would captivate the nation. Sarah spoke of her upbringing in a small town, of the prejudices she had internalized without even realizing it. She talked about the fear and ignorance that had driven her actions, breaking down in tears as she confronted the ugliness of her own biases. Snoop listened, his face a mask of concentration. When he finally spoke, his words were unexpected. "I've been on the receiving end of hate more times than I can count," he said. "But what I've learned is that hate doesn't beat hate. Only understanding can do that." The conversation shifted, becoming a dialogue not just between two individuals, but a reflection of a broader societal struggle. Snoop shared his own experiences with racism, the challenges he'd faced, and the ways he'd worked to overcome them. As they talked, experts in racial reconciliation, psychologists and sociologists provided context and commentary, turning the conversation into an impromptu masterclass on confronting and overcoming racial biases. But the real shock came halfway through the broadcast. Snoop revealed the true extent of his plan. "This ain't just a one-time thing," he announced. "We're taking this show on the road." He unveiled an ambitious nationwide tour. Not a concert tour, but a series of town halls and workshops. Snoop, alongside Sarah and a team of experts, would travel across America, engaging communities in difficult but necessary conversations about race, prejudice, and reconciliation. The announcement sent shockwaves through the media landscape. Supporters hailed it as a revolutionary approach to addressing racism, while critics accused Snoop of going soft or selling out. Back in South Central, Big Mike watched the broadcast with a group of community members, their reactions a mix of surprise, skepticism, and hope. Tasha, the aspiring lawyer, immediately began drafting ideas for how this tour could interface with legal reform efforts. In Beverly Hills, record executive Victor Goldstein's jaw dropped. This was far beyond anything he had anticipated or prepared for. His daughter Zoe, watching beside him, felt a surge of pride and a renewed sense of purpose in her social justice efforts. Alicia Rodriguez, the journalist, found her story transforming before her eyes. What had started as a report on a single incident was now evolving into a long-form documentary series following Snoop's tour and its impact on communities across America. Online, the response was explosive. Raj Patel's social media platform became ground zero for heated debates and discussions. Memes and hashtags proliferated, with Jai Snoop dialogue and Facing Racism Together trending globally. As the broadcast concluded, Snoop looked directly into the camera. "This ain't gonna be easy," he said, his voice carrying the weight of the challenge ahead. "But nothing worth doing ever is. It's time we stop talking at each other and start talking to each other. Who's with me?" The screen faded to black, leaving America in a state of stunned reflection. In homes, offices, and public spaces across the country, people began to engage in conversations they had long avoided. The incident that had started with a splash of juice had transformed into a catalyst for national self-examination. As night fell once again on Los Angeles, Snoop Dogg prepared for the journey ahead. He knew the path would be difficult, filled with challenges and potential backlash. But as he looked out over the city lights, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than any he had known before. The tour was set to begin in a week, starting in the heart of South Central Los Angeles. America held its breath, wondering if this unexpected turn of events could truly spark the change it so desperately needed. In the days following Snoop Dogg's unprecedented broadcast, the world seemed to spin on a different axis. The ripple effects of his announcement spread far and wide, touching lives in ways both profound and unexpected. The first stop of Snoop's dialogue tour in South Central Los Angeles was a powder keg of emotions. The community center was packed to capacity, with people spilling out onto the streets. As Snoop and Sarah took the stage, the atmosphere was tense, electric with anticipation and lingering anger. Big Mike, acting as a community liaison, opened the session. "We're here to listen, to speak, and most importantly, to understand," he said, his deep voice resonating through the room. "This ain't about pointing fingers. It's about finding a way forward." As Snoop and Sarah shared their stories and opened the floor for discussion, raw emotions surfaced. People shared their own experiences of racism, their fears, and their hopes. There were tears, shouts, and moments of profound silence, but most importantly, there was dialogue. Meanwhile, the corporate world was scrambling to respond. Victor Goldstein, seeing the potential in Snoop's initiative, announced a multi-million-dollar fund for racial equity programs in the music industry. His daughter Zoe, inspired by the turn of events, started a youth ambassador program to support the tour. Other celebrities began to take notice. Some, like basketball legend LeBron James and pop star Taylor Swift, publicly endorsed Snoop's efforts and pledged support. Others remained skeptically silent, watching to see how events would unfold. In the political arena, reactions were mixed. Some politicians saw an opportunity to align themselves with a popular movement, while others criticized it as a celebrity stunt. Senator James Mitchell, a longtime advocate for criminal justice reform, reached out to Snoop's team to discuss potential legislative actions that could arise from the tour's findings. Tasha, the aspiring lawyer, found herself thrust into the spotlight when a clip of her asking a pointed question about systemic racism in the legal system went viral. Overnight, she became a voice for young legal professionals pushing for change. The tour moved from city to city, each stop bringing its own unique challenges and breakthroughs. In a small town in the Midwest, Sarah faced her own community, confronting the roots of her prejudices. The emotional reunion with her family, who were struggling to understand her actions and her transformation, became a powerful moment in Alicia Rodriguez's documentary series. Online, the conversation continued to evolve. Raj Patel's platform became a hub for discussion, with users sharing their own stories and organizing local dialogue groups inspired by the tour. The hashtag #ChinFacing Racism Together spawned millions of posts, ranging from personal reflections to community action plans. But not all reactions were positive. As the tour progressed, it faced opposition from various quarters. In some cities, protesters accused Snoop of selling out or oversimplifying complex issues. Right-wing commentators labeled the initiative as reverse racism and called for boycotts of Snoop's music. The pressure began to take its toll. Midway through the tour, Sarah Thompson had a breakdown on stage, overwhelmed by the weight of her actions and the intense public scrutiny. The incident sparked a national conversation about redemption, forgiveness, and the human cost of confronting societal issues. Snoop, too, faced challenges. His past lyrics and behavior were scrutinized anew, with critics accusing him of hypocrisy. In a particularly tense moment during a stop in Atlanta, he was confronted by a group of women who questioned his commitment to addressing misogyny alongside racism. Yet, despite the setbacks, the impact of the tour was undeniable. Schools began incorporating discussions about race and prejudice into their curricula. Workplaces revisited their diversity and inclusion policies. Local police departments, inspired by the open dialogues, started community engagement programs. As the tour entered its final weeks, a new hashtag began trending. What comes next? People across the nation, energized by the conversations started by Snoop and his team, were looking towards the future, asking how to turn dialogue into lasting change. In Washington, D.C., lawmakers on both sides of the aisle began drafting new legislation addressing racial inequities, citing the tour's impact on public opinion. As Snoop prepared for the tour's final stop, back where it all began at LAX, he reflected on the journey. What had started as a response to a personal attack had grown into a movement larger than himself. The true test, he realized, would be what happened after the cameras stopped rolling and the hard work of change began. The world watched and waited, wondering if this unexpected journey could truly be the catalyst for the change so many had long fought for. As the dialogue tour approached its final destination, the transformation in both Snoop Dogg and those around him was palpable. The journey had been grueling, enlightening, and profoundly impactful, not just for the public, but for everyone involved. Snoop, known for his laid-back demeanor, had evolved into a thoughtful, articulate advocate for social change. His growth was evident in the way he handled challenging questions and navigated complex discussions. No longer just a rapper or a celebrity, he had become a respected voice in the ongoing conversation about race in America. One pivotal moment came during a stop in Chicago. A young man, his voice shaking with emotion, confronted Snoop about his past lyrics and lifestyle. "How can you stand there talking about respect when your music degrades women and glorifies violence?" he demanded. Instead of becoming defensive, Snoop took a deep breath and addressed the question head-on. "You're right to call me out," he said, his voice carrying a new weight of responsibility. "I can't change my past, but I can own it. I can learn from it, and I can use my platform to do better, to be better." This moment of vulnerability and accountability resonated deeply with many, especially younger fans who were seeing a different side of the iconic rapper. It sparked a series of honest conversations within the hip-hop community about responsibility and the power of words. Sarah Thompson's journey was equally transformative. From being the face of racism in a viral video, she had become a powerful advocate for self-reflection and change. In a poignant interview with Alicia Rodriguez, Sarah revealed the deep work she had done to confront her biases. "It's not enough to say, 'I'm not racist,'" Sarah explained, her eyes reflecting a hard-earned wisdom. "We have to actively work to identify and challenge our prejudices every single day." Her words became a rallying cry for many who were grappling with their own biases and seeking a path forward. The tour also had a profound impact on those working behind the scenes. Marcus, Snoop's manager, found himself re-evaluating his role in the music industry. He began developing a mentorship program for young black professionals in entertainment, aiming to address the systemic barriers he had often overlooked in his own career. Jasmine, the social media guru, leveraged her expertise to create an online platform dedicated to sharing resources on anti-racism and promoting ongoing dialogue. What started as a tour supplement became a vibrant community of its own, connecting people across geographical and cultural divides. Even DJ, initially skeptical of the tour's potential, found himself deeply moved. He began incorporating socially conscious messages into his mixes, using music as a tool for unity and understanding. As the tour progressed, its influence spread beyond American borders. International media picked up the story, and similar initiatives began sprouting up in countries grappling with their own racial tensions. Snoop received invitations to speak at the United Nations and other global forums, elevating the conversation to an international stage. Back in the legal world, Tasha's viral moment had turned into a movement. She spearheaded a coalition of young lawyers dedicated to addressing racial bias in the justice system. Their work began to influence policy discussions at state and federal levels. The tour also faced its share of challenges and criticisms. Some accused Snoop of oversimplifying complex issues, while others questioned the long-term impact of such initiatives. There were moments of tension, heated arguments, and even a few physical altercations at some tour stops. But with each challenge, Snoop and his team adapted and grew. They brought in experts to provide historical context, facilitated smaller group discussions to address specific community concerns, and continuously refined their approach based on feedback. As the final stop at LAX approached, anticipation built across the nation. The airport, once the site of an ugly incident, was now poised to become a symbol of transformation and hope. In a surprise move, Snoop announced that the final event would be more than just a discussion. It would be a day-long festival of unity, featuring music, art, and dialogue. Artists from diverse backgrounds were invited to perform, and community organizations set up booths to provide resources and information. The day of the event dawned bright and clear. As Snoop took the stage for the final time, he looked out over a sea of faces, diverse in color, age, and background, but united in purpose. "When we started this journey," Snoop began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd, "I thought it was about changing others. But I've learned that real change starts with changing ourselves." He paused, his eyes scanning the audience. "This tour is ending, but our work is just beginning. Every one of us has the power to make a difference, to challenge hate with understanding, to replace fear with knowledge." As Snoop's words rang out, there was a palpable sense of hope and determination in the air. The incident that had sparked this journey had been transformed into a catalyst for change, a beginning rather than an end. The crowd erupted into cheers, not just for Snoop, but for the promise of a better future they were all committed to building, one conversation at a time. As the sun began to set on the final day of the Dialogue Tour at LAX, there was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. The Festival of Unity had been a resounding success, with thousands of people from all walks of life coming together to celebrate diversity and engage in meaningful conversations. But everyone knew that the real test was yet to come. Snoop Dogg, along with his core team, retreated to a makeshift green room to prepare for the tour's grand finale. The energy was electric, a mix of excitement and nervous tension. Marcus paced back and forth, his phone buzzing constantly with messages from media outlets clamoring for exclusive interviews. "Snoop," he said, his voice tight with stress. "CNN, Fox and MSNBC are all requesting live feeds for your closing speech. This is bigger than we ever imagined." Jasmine looked up from her tablet, her eyes wide. Social media is exploding. As Snoop's final word is trending worldwide. People are sharing their personal growth stories from the tour. It's beautiful. DJ, who had been quietly working on a special mix for the closing ceremony, removed his headphones. "Whatever you say out there, brother, it's going to echo for years to come. No pressure, right?" He chuckled, but there was a hint of seriousness in his eyes. Snoop sat in silence, his eyes closed, deep in thought. The weight of the moment was not lost on him. This wasn't just about wrapping up a successful tour. It was about setting the stage for what came next. Sarah Thompson, who had been a constant presence throughout the tour, approached Snoop. Her transformation was evident. Gone was the nervous, defensive woman from the beginning of the journey. In her place stood someone confident, yet humble. "Snoop," she said softly, "I just wanted to thank you, not just for forgiving me, but for pushing me to be better. Whatever happens next, you've changed my life." Snoop opened his eyes and looked at Sarah, a small smile playing on his lips. "Nah, Sarah. You changed your own life. I just gave you the stage to do it." As the team made their final preparations, outside, the festival was reaching its crescendo. Alicia Rodriguez, now a familiar face to many, was conducting last-minute interviews for her documentary. "This tour has been a roller coaster of emotions," one attendee told her, tears in his eyes. "I came here angry, looking for someone to blame, but I'm leaving with hope and a commitment to do better." Tasha, the young lawyer whose passion had inspired many throughout the tour, was busy coordinating with a group of legal professionals. They had drafted a proposal for comprehensive police reform and were planning to present it to lawmakers in the coming weeks. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the main stage was bathed in a warm, golden light. The crowd, which had swelled to tens of thousands, fell into a hushed silence as Snoop Dogg emerged from backstage. He walked slowly to the center of the stage, his face serene but determined. The journey of the past months had changed him, tempered his spirit like steel in a forge. Gone was the carefree rapper of old. In his place stood a man who had glimpsed the possibility of real, lasting change and was prepared to fight for it. Snoop took the microphone, surveying the sea of faces before him. Each person in the crowd represented a story, a struggle, a hope for a better future. He saw young and old, people of every color and background, all united in this moment. As he prepared to speak, to deliver the words that would cap this extraordinary journey and set the tone for what was to come, a gentle breeze swept across the airport grounds. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to hear what this unlikely champion of social change would say. Snoop took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the crowd one last time. In that moment, he saw flashes of every conversation, every tear, every breakthrough that had occurred on this tour. He saw the faces of those who had started as strangers and become allies, of those who had confronted their deepest biases and chosen to change. With a slight nod, as if affirming some internal resolution, Snoop raised the microphone to his lips. The crowd leaned in, cameras focused, and millions watching live broadcasts around the world waited in anticipation. This was more than just the end of a tour. It was the beginning of something much bigger, a movement that had the potential to reshape the conversation about race in America and beyond. And it all hinged on what Snoop Dogg would say next. Snoop Dogg's voice, rich with emotion and purpose, cut through the silence like a beacon of hope. "Family," he began, his use of the word immediately setting a tone of unity. "We've come a long way together." The crowd hung on his every word as he continued. "When this journey started, it was because of hate, a moment of ignorance that could have torn us apart. But look at us now." He gestured to the diverse crowd before him. "We turned that moment into a movement." As he spoke, screens around the stage flickered to life, showing highlights from the tour. Emotional conversations, breakthrough moments, and scenes of people from all walks of life coming together. "This tour wasn't just about me, or about what happened that day at the airport," Snoop said, his voice gaining strength. "It was about all of us, every single person who's ever felt the sting of prejudice, who's ever been judged for the color of their skin, the accent in their voice, or the God they pray to." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But it was also about those who've done the judging, those who've carried hate in their hearts without even knowing why." At this, the camera panned to Sarah Thompson standing at the side of the stage. She stood tall, tears streaming down her face, a living testament to the possibility of change. "We've learned that change isn't easy," Snoop continued. "It's uncomfortable, it's messy, but it's necessary." His voice took on a challenging tone. "And it doesn't stop here. What we've done on this tour, it's just the beginning." Suddenly, Snoop stepped away from the microphone and walked to the edge of the stage. In a move that caught everyone by surprise, he jumped down into the crowd. Security tensed, but Snoop waved them off. He made his way through the audience, touching hands, looking people in the eye. "Each one of you," he said, his voice carried by the wireless mic, "has the power to make a difference, to challenge hate when you see it, to offer understanding when it's needed." As he moved, the crowd parted, creating a path. Snoop continued walking, his voice growing more impassioned. "We can't rely on others to fix this for us. Not politicians, not celebrities, not some magical solution. It's on us, all of us." He stopped in the middle of the crowd, surrounded on all sides by people of every color and background. "I want you to look at the person next to you," he instructed. "Really look at them." The crowd did as he asked, strangers turning to face each other in a moment of unexpected intimacy. "That person has a story," Snoop said softly. "They have struggles you know nothing about, dreams you've never imagined, and they deserve your respect, your understanding, and your compassion." He let the moment hang in the air before his voice rose again, filled with determination. "From this day forward, we don't turn a blind eye. We don't stay silent. We stand up, we speak out, and we do the work. Every single day." Snoop began making his way back to the stage, the crowd closing in behind him, creating a human wave of unity. "It won't be easy," he admitted as he climbed back onto the platform. "There will be setbacks. There will be those who resist change, who cling to hate because it's all they know." His eyes scanned the crowd, fierce and determined. "But we persist. We educate, we lead by example, and bit by bit, conversation by conversation, we build the world we want to see." As he neared the end of his speech, Snoop's voice softened, becoming almost introspective. "I stand before you today not as a perfect man. I've made mistakes, I've said things I'm not proud of, but I'm committed to doing better, to being better, and I'm asking each of you to make that same commitment." The energy in the crowd was electric, a mix of emotion and resolve. Snoop raised his hand and thousands followed suit, a sea of raised arms symbolizing their shared pledge. "This is our moment," Snoop declared, his voice ringing out across the airport and to the millions watching around the world. "This is our time to rewrite the story of our nation, of our world. A story where the color of your skin doesn't determine your worth, where we celebrate our differences instead of fearing them, where love trumps hate every single time." He took a deep breath, then delivered his final words with quiet intensity. "The tour ends today, but our work is just beginning. Are you with me?" The response was deafening. The crowd erupted in cheers, applause, and cries of affirmation. It wasn't just agreement. It was a roar of commitment, a collective promise to carry the spirit of the tour forward. As the cheers continued, Snoop stood silently on the stage, his arms spread wide, embracing the moment and the movement he had helped create. Tears streamed down his face, mirroring those in the crowd. In that moment, it was clear to everyone present and watching around the world. This wasn't just the end of a tour. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the ongoing struggle for equality and understanding. And Snoop Dogg, an unlikely hero, had helped turn the page. In the days and weeks following Snoop Dogg's powerful speech at LAX, the impact of the Dialogue Tour reverberated across the nation and beyond. The movement that had started with a single act of racism had blossomed into a force for change that touched lives in ways both big and small. Locally, the effects were immediate and tangible. The Los Angeles Police Department, inspired by the tour's message, implemented a new community outreach program designed to build trust and understanding between officers and the communities they served. Chief of Police Maria Rodriguez credited the tour for opening her eyes to the need for systemic change within the force. In the corporate world, Victor Goldstein's record label wasn't the only one to take action. Major companies across various industries began revising their diversity and inclusion policies, with many citing the tour as a wake-up call. Workplace training programs focused on racial sensitivity and unconscious bias became the norm rather than the exception. The education sector saw significant changes as well. School districts across the country began incorporating lessons from the tour into their curricula, fostering open discussions about race and prejudice from an early age. The hashtag #BestClassroom conversations trended as teachers shared their experiences in bringing these difficult but necessary topics into their classrooms. On the political front, the impact was equally profound. Senator James Mitchell, true to his word, introduced comprehensive legislation aimed at addressing racial inequalities in the criminal justice system. The bill, unofficially dubbed the Snoop Act by the media, garnered bipartisan support, a rarity in the often divided political landscape. Internationally, the ripple effects continued to spread. Countries grappling with their own racial tensions looked to the tour as a model for fostering dialogue and understanding. The United Nations invited Snoop Dogg to speak at a special assembly on global racial harmony, a surreal moment that underscored just how far the movement had come. For the individuals at the heart of the story, life would never be the same. Sarah Thompson, once the face of casual racism, became a sought-after speaker on personal growth and overcoming prejudice. Her journey from villain to advocate resonated with many who were struggling to confront their own biases. Tasha, the young lawyer, saw her career take off as she became a leading voice in the fight for legal reform. Her passionate advocacy, born from that viral moment during the tour, inspired a new generation of law students to pursue careers in civil rights and social justice. Snoop Dogg himself embraced his new role as an unlikely civil rights leader. While he didn't abandon his music career, his lyrics and public persona evolved to reflect his newfound purpose. He used his platform to continue the conversations started on the tour, collaborating with artists across genres to create music that challenged societal norms and promoted unity. As the one-year anniversary of the airport incident approached, a sense of cautious optimism pervaded the nation. While no one claimed that racism had been eradicated or that all problems had been solved, there was a palpable sense that real progress was being made. Difficult conversations were happening in homes, workplaces, and communities across the country. The journey that had begun with a splash of juice had transformed into a tidal wave of change, proving that even the darkest moments could be turned into opportunities for growth, understanding, and hope. 5 years after the Dialogue Tour, Snoop Dogg stood at the newly christened Unity Plaza at LAX, where a monument commemorating the journey now stood. As he gazed at the diverse crowd gathered for the unveiling, he reflected on the changes he'd witnessed. While challenges remained, the conversation had evolved. Schools, workplaces, and communities continued to build on the tour's legacy. Sarah Thompson, now a respected diversity consultant, stood nearby with her mixed-race adopted daughter. Snoop smiled, knowing that the work continues. As he often said in his speeches, change is a journey, not a destination. And we're all in it together. You've just witnessed an incredible journey of transformation and hope. If you've stayed with us until the end, take a moment to reflect on how this story has impacted you. We want to hear your thoughts. Comment, "I watched it all" below, and share how this tale of redemption and unity has affected your perspective. Remember, change starts with each one of us. How will you carry this message forward in your own life? Let's keep this conversation going and spread the spirit of understanding and unity. Don't forget to click on the video appearing on your screen now to continue exploring powerful stories that can change our world. Together we can make a difference.